In this lab video, we're going to learn about very basic HTML5 and a few other things such as setting up a proper deployment directory for our websites, as well as referencing relative paths. So there are three things in particular we'll look at. First, the deployment directory. Now, the deployment directory is basically where we store all of our files that will be part of our website. And it's always a good idea to keep a very neat and tidy and organized deployment directory. Oftentimes, novices just throw all of the files into the root of any particular directory, and as the site grows in complexity, you have tons of images, tons of HTML files, tons of other files and so forth, CSS files, JavaScript files. Those can get very hard to manage if there's not a proper structure to it. So we'll look at the deployment directory first of all. Second of which, we'll look at basic HTML. So this is as basic as we're going to get. And what we're going to actually try to develop is a simple site that looks like this. We call it Zen Crapple. And it's a site with a few links at the top with an image and some sections and so on, just to get us understanding, just to ease us into HTML5. And we're going to do some linking. And within the linking, we're going to learn about relative paths. Relative paths are always a must, or at least are the types of paths that we want to use in our website, so they can be very portable, so we can throw them anywhere online, or we can even copy them onto a flash drive and give a friend and so forth, and it will still work. So relative paths, that will be our third item for today. So let's get started with our deployment directory. So anywhere you can find a folder anywhere. You just pick a spot, and you want to create your deployment directory, which is just a root directory called you can call it my site. Okay, something to that effect. And within my site, you can create a few folders right off the bat immediately, because usually websites have images, so we want to create our images folder. Okay, we'll throw some images in there afterwards. Then we may want to create also our pages folder for all sub-pages that may be within the site. For this exercise, we won't necessarily need anything more than these two folders and a couple of HTML files, HTML files thrown into the mix. What I find also helpful is if we can expose our file name extensions to help us create quickly on Windows HTML files. So if you are running, let's say, Windows 8, for instance, like I am, you will want to hit the View tab and then just check this option, File Name Extensions. If you check this option, what happens is you can actually go to New, and you can create a new text document right like that. And what it will allow you to do is author the extension of that text document. So just like I did it there, so I can immediately create an HTML compatible file without having to go into my editor and then rename it or save it as a certain file. So it's very helpful, especially for developers. So if you're running let's say Windows 7 or earlier versions, you'll find this under folder options in the I think it's in the View tab. I can't recall, but you want to look for an option called File Name Extensions and just View File Name Extensions, View Known Extensions for View Extensions for known file types. I think that was the name of the option in earlier versions of Windows. But what I've just created there is basically what we're going to start with: a pages folder, images folder, and an index.html. Now the images will be provided to you. You can download them on the course website. We'll need a couple of images. Let me just hit the labs folder. This is basically where I have the completed site. The images that we're going to look at are this one of this Zen looking frog and a little pumpkin. So this one's called images.jpg for some reason or the other, and this one is called image of pumpkin.jpg. Usually when you have files like these, you rarely ever want to include spaces in their file names, because those spaces they sort of translate into hex characters that become a very some problems can actually arise from actually having spaces in your file names, especially when working with web authoring. So web developers usually replace those spaces with underscores, like what you see here. So this is something that you may want to use as a convention. But anyway, let's get started. So as long as you have access to these resources, download the images and throw them inside of your images folder. Once you have created an index.html file, you can open that file in your favorite editor, alright, as I have it open here already, and we'll begin authoring our HTML document that represents the first page of the website itself. Now I must stress that the first page of your website must be named index.htm or index.html, or even if you're doing server-side scripting, it must be index.php, for instance. So this is a web convention. If you name it anything else, you will be breaking convention and your site will not work the way it's supposed to work. So you must name the entry point or the home page of your site index.something. Alright, just keep that in mind, and it should be on your root, on the root directory, like we have index here at our root directory. So we'll begin authoring our HTML5 web document. So we'll start with our doc type descriptor. From discussions, this is basically what it looks like. Let's say a left angle bracket, exclamation, doc type, space, HTML, right angle bracket. And we'll continue with defining our HTML tags. Again, it's a good practice when developing, when coding HTML like this, to open and close your tags as soon as you throw them in there, so you don't forget to close them, afterwards. So within the HTML tags, as mentioned, these HTML tags start to define the entire HTML document. Within those tags, you have a couple of other nested tags. Typically, we have our head tags and so on. So I threw in also there lang equal en, just to specify the language that this page uses, and I'll show you an example of why this is necessary in some cases. And yeah, so onto the head section. So as I mentioned before, when we throw a tag in there, it's always a good idea to open the tag and close the tag, even if you haven't authored anything to go within the tags themselves. Within our head, we're going to throw a few things in, but we're going to throw the body tags again, open and close the body tags. So within the head, we're going to throw some meta tags into place. So the meta tags, as discussed, are there to describe the page itself, mainly for the purpose of search engines. So search engines usually crawl sites, and they look for these meta tags to understand what the site is about. So in this case, we have a meta tag with the name, description, and the content. The Zen Crapper website will teach you about finding balance through the frog. So this information is what the search engines, for instance, will use to, let's say, prepare a teaser about your page. So that particular description is what shows up in search indexes, or say search lists, for instance, when you search for certain things. The other meta tag would be keywords, and the keywords, as discussed, would index your site on search engines based on certain phrases or words. In this case, we want to register our site content with respect to these words: Zen, Crapo, Enlightenment, Nirvana, Peace, Frog, Meditation. It's just a comma separated list, and these search crawlers would understand this meta tag and index your site accordingly. So we can throw other meta tags such as author, so you can specify who is the author of this particular page, and in this case it's the CSI2205 class instructor. You can put your name when you author your own site. And then we want to throw in the character set as well, and finally the title. So this is basically what you'll need in your head section. So we can continue with the body section. And in the body section, just to show you what we're aiming for, we want to have like a section, but in this particular section everything is started centered. So you'll notice everything is started centered on the page. Now to create this overarching style, we want to have an enclosing block element sort of like a div, for instance, to specify a particular style on every single element within it. So this is why this div element was thrown into the body first. Alright, and within the div element, to give that centered arrangement, we're going to throw this statement in there. Now this is sort of jumping ahead to CSS. We'll learn about CSS later on, but what this is, it's an attribute, as we learned about attributes. It's the style attribute that allows us to specify inline styling information. So we can quickly say that everything within this particular div element will have its text aligned to the center. That's basically all I would say. That'll give us this effect here. Okay? Then we can throw in our header tags. Again, header is, it comes with HTML5, and the header tag sort of defines the head section of our page. Like I mentioned, HTML is all about structure, so we get to define the structure of our content using HTML. And what we're basically doing is we're outlining or specifying the head structure or head section of our page. And within the head section, we'll place the name of the site using our H1 tags, alright, to give it that big, bold appearance. And we're going to also place our navigation. And again, nav is another element that's used that comes with HTML5 that allows us to specify navigational links. Alright, so just to look at it, the name up here and let's say the name up here and the links below, they represent the content within the header section. Okay, as you'll see. So we begin authoring the links within our nav, and this should be familiar. This is our anchor tag, and it references our pages folder that we created earlier. And within the pages folder, we will have, which doesn't exist yet, a page called about.html, which has some more content that we can link to from our home page. And this is a section that's actually visible to the user. Okay, so as you can see here, the about us here sort of resolves to a hyperlink. The text itself resolves to a hyperlink, so that when we click on it, we'll be taken to our about page, but that doesn't exist yet. Alright, these little symbols here, the bar, you can find that on your keyboard if you hit shift and backslash. Usually it's with the backslash key. So these bars just help to separate the links, just to provide that, demarcation. Alright, so we can continue to throw in another link here. So we're linking also to our contact page, which also doesn't exist yet within our pages folder. So this is an example, guys. This is an example of a relative path, but I'll speak more about this later on after we completely author this particular page. Alright, and same format. So we have our reference, pages/contact.html, and we have the name, or at least the label of our link. And now we can author the other main section of our page, and again we use another HTML5 tag called section. So the section tag is used to author like major sections, or basically major sections of your web page. And the major section that we're authoring is basically, it basically starts with this image of the frog, and it continues down to there, okay, with welcome and this Latin text included. So the first thing that we've thrown in there is our frog, the image of our frog, and we're using the image tag, and we're using another relative path to reference our images folder this time, which references our frog, which happens to be under the file name images.jpg for some strange reason. We're also throwing in an attribute called width, and width, we're just specifying the width to be 400. If we just specify width and not height, that means that the height will automatically scale within proportion, or within that height-width ratio of the image itself. So you can actually scale images up and scale them down by just specifying a particular dimension on one side, whether the width or the height, if we want. Our alt attribute, as mentioned, will basically be displayed as a thumbnail, as a tooltip, sorry, as if we hover, if the page fails, if the image fails to load, then it will be displayed in place of the image. So we can see here, if we hover over the frog long enough, I think, nope, okay, I think, Doesn't work in this case. So we'll continue here our header. This is our page header, and notice that we use the H2 tag instead of the H1 tag. Alright, just to provide that distinction between the two. We want our site name to be the most prominent on the page. So H2 is a little smaller in this case. And then we throw some text in between a couple of between a paragraph tag, an opening and closing paragraph tag. Alright, so this text here is basically filler text, Latin lorem ipsum text that we can find just about anywhere, and it's often used to pad things up, to just give it you know, a mock type of appearance before we actually throw the real content in there, just to see how it looks. So once we have that in place, then our main section of the page is finished, and we can head on to our footer section. To author our footer section, we use the footer tags. Again, these come with HTML5, and within our footer we'll just have a little copyright sign. This is basically, it's a symbol that represents the actual copyright sign that you'll see in a bit. Ampersand, copy, and then semicolon. And there are a few other HTML specific symbols that resolve to actual rendered symbols that we'll learn about later on. Then we'll just put a little footer, you know, some footer text, copyright Zencrap of 2014, all rights reserved, something to that effect. And once we have that in place, alright, so once we have that in place, our index file should be more or less complete, and it should look like this. Okay? So we notice our copyright sign at ampersand, copy, semicolon resolves to that particular symbol there. Right? So once we have that file in place, what I'll do is I'll take you across to our deployment directory, and what you want to do is head into your pages folder. Alright? And inside of your pages folder, you are going to create about.html using the same approach that we saw last time. We just right click, go to new, hit text document, and provided that you have visible file name extensions, you can actually author. I'm just going to throw the contact.html page in there just to demonstrate it. You can actually author the file name extension, so you don't have to save it as a particular file, as you know, you sometimes have to do. It'll prompt you to do this, but you know, it's okay because you know that HTML is a valid extension. So once we have that about.html in place, what you're going to do is open it up in your editor. It's going to be blank because you know we haven't authored it yet, and you are going to throw much of the same markup that we saw last time in place. We have our doc type descriptor like the last time, and then we have our opening and closing HTML tags. And then we have our lang equal en, just to specify the language of the particular page. En means English, obviously. We can have other shorthand versions of languages. We throw our head section in place, and we throw a body section in place. Then within our head section, we throw the same meta tags that we saw earlier. Alright? Description, keywords, author. Of course, if you have different content on this particular page, you can alter the meta tags just so that search engines sort of register this particular page a bit differently than the previous, right? Just to make it accurate in terms of referencing its specific content. Then you throw the char set, and finally the title. The title is a bit different on this page because it's our About Us page. So we're using the same main title of the site, but we're using a bar or a pipe, and after that pipe we'll throw in the specific name of this particular page, which is About Us. That seems to be a convention. Then within our body we throw our div section in place. Again, our body still uses that alignment, that center alignment. Let me show you what it looks like, or what we're aiming for when we hit About Us. We want this sort of center alignment for the content. You'll notice the About Us page has the title above the image, whereas the home page has the image above the title. So we're going to cater to that when we author that section. And then within that we have our header section, again, like I mentioned, the header contains the name of the site as well as our navigation bar. And within our nav elements, we throw in a few hyperlinks. But keep in mind that in this case, home is actually referenced. And I'm going to speak about these dots in a bit when we talk about relative paths. Alright? But about us in this case isn't referenced. Since we're on the about us page, we don't want the user actually clicking a link that takes us to the same resource that we clicked from. You know, it's usually proper convention to safeguard against this. And then we have our contact link. You'll notice that the paths are a bit different here. Alright? Again, just keep that in mind when we talk about relative paths in a bit. Then we author our main content section using our section tags. And we start with the title of the page using our H2 tags. Then we throw in our image, which is that pumpkin image that we saw here. We throw width of 200 and our alt is pumpkin in this case. And then we throw in some paragraph tags and alarm Ipsum text as we saw before. Alright. Now HTML, like I mentioned, HTML doesn't really care about spaces and line returns in this case. So regardless of how many spaces we put between this particular text here and this text here, it will only register as a single space when rendered. Alright, like this. And then let's just get rid of that. And then we can throw in our footer section as we saw before. Okay? It's the same footer as the last time. So you'll notice that we're sort of reusing a lot of what the home page already provided in terms of structure, but we're changing just the bits inside of the section here, and we're just changing the references inside of our navigation here just to represent the current page itself. Now in terms of relative paths, now how this is working is that when we're on the home page, we're actually looking at this particular page here, index. Okay? How relative paths work is that they reference from the resource that you're currently viewing. Now what that means is that when we're looking at content on the home page, which is our index.html file, if we'd like to get to a page within the pages folder, we'll actually have to go from the index file into pages and then find the file there itself. Okay? So that's all about, that's basically the simplest description when it comes to understanding relative paths. Relative paths are always relative to the current resource that you're looking at. Okay? So if we'd like to reference an image from our index page, we'll have to go inside of images and find the name of the image itself. Now let me draw that connection with you. Let's go back to index.html. We'll see how we reference our image. So index.html is currently on the root directory of our deployment directory, right? And our frog image is inside of images named images.jpg. To get to that image from index, we'll have to go images/images.jpg, which is what we've done here. Make sense? Similarly, to get from our index to, let's say, about us, which is inside of pages, we'll have to go from index inside of pages to about.html. Okay? Which is basically what we did here. So we went inside of pages / about.html. Okay? So relative paths are relatively easy when it comes to referencing from, let's say, the home page that's in the root directory. But what about referencing from about.html, which we just created? Okay? When referencing from about, it's a bit different and it's a bit trickier, considering that about is inside of a subfolder. So you'll find that when we go to about us, everything sort of loads and everything sort of works. But there's something different that we'll have to do, considering that we're using relative paths. Now let me show you here in the source what I mean by that. So we're looking at the About Us page here. And the About Us page, as we know, based on our deployment directory structure, is inside of the Pages folder. Now if we need to reference our index file from within the Pages folder, within the About Us file, within the Pages folder rather, we'll actually have to go up and out of that directory to find index. Now the action of going up and out of a directory is resolved to ... This is why we use ... here in our About Us page when we want to reference our index.html. We have to actually go up out of the pages directory from about, and then we actually get to the level of our root directory within which the index.html file resides. Alright, so that ... is used to go up and out of a particular containing directory. Alright. Similarly, if you want to reference an image from our about.html file, and we know that images, to get to images from about, we have to actually go out of that folder and inside of images, then we use the same ... as we did before. So we have ... okay, that gets us out of the pages folder. Now we're looking at images, pages, index.html, and we actually have to go from there inside of images, and inside of images we find image of pumpkin.jpg. Okay, so that's all there is to relative paths. We just have to understand what resource needs to access which other resource, and we have to plan a path from the current resource to the intended resource itself. We have to remember that when we're within a subfolder and we need to access a resource outside of that subfolder, we'll have to use the ... symbol to indicate going up and out of a particular directory. Okay, so that's basically it in terms of what we had planned for this lab. Again, if you have any questions, we can post it to the group and we can discuss it. So this is as basic as we can get in terms of an introductory lab session for HTML. At the end of it, we should have a functional site, or at least a functional couple of pages like this that we can sort of call a website. Alright, what I'd like you to do as an exercise is to complete the menu, author your contact us page. You can put any content that you wish inside of that contact us page and link it both from the index as well as the contact, or rather as well as the about.html page. So you want to link all the pages together so it works well. As of now, I don't have a contact us page, or a contact page rather, or at least nothing's inside of it, so nothing shows up. So I'd like you to complete that and have that ready. Alright.